Hello, 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 and a big warm welcome to our episode today. So glad you're here. So glad that you came back for part 2. As always, I'm Abbie. This is Stories Lived, Stories Told, and here's what I know. Everything in our social worlds is created through communication. That's the stories we tell, the way we show up to each other, the patterns we find ourselves in, and so much more. If we take some time to understand how we're communicating and really how we can be communicating better, then we can really start to change the world around us and create the kind of lives, the kind of societies, the kind of cultures that we want to be a part of. Today, we have part 2 of our conversation with Stephanie Higgs. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I'll definitely recommend that you go back and do that first. Today, we are discussing the value of having shared language to help us understand our worlds better, different ways that Stephanie has been challenged herself by what she teaches. And we also talked about that part of Stephanie's definition of a better social world, which is definitely one that I share, includes pulling ourselves away from technology and really being present to one another. We already know that Stephanie brings great energy to this conversation, and that makes me feel energized and excited, and hopefully does the same for you too. And I think the second half of this conversation is just full to the brim with great ideas and strategies for being intentional in the ways we show up to other people. Okay, so when we last left off, Stephanie and I had been talking about things she's learning right now, and we both talked about the power of words and quotes and language that has really stuck with us and helped us understand ourselves better. So we're picking right back up with that conversation about language today. So let's jump back in. Okay, where this is making me go then is to talk a little bit more about language.
Okay.
I, in one of my earlier conversations, was able to talk to some other teachers, and I got connected with them because the CMM Institute actually has kind of a program, game/activity called Cosmo Kids, where they're trying to bring some of these ideas of this theory that, you know, for so long has only existed in the world of academia, to say, how can we actually bring this to people? And what if, you know, we start young and the next generation of leaders already has all of these skills around empathy and making meaning and so many different areas? You know, what can the world look like if from a young age people get to learn about this kind of thing? Anyway, what they would talk about in our conversation was how important it was for them to have shared language in the classroom or common language to be able to create like shared meaning. And so I wonder how you see that in your classroom, if that's something you think about creating for your students or how you see it happen.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And actually, I was just talking with a company that provides some social emotional supports and strategies and curriculum, because I was looking at it from kind of that next level up of not even just with students, but in all of us that interact with kiddos and making sure that we all have and share common language. And so, for example, a skill that I have recently been digging into with some students is the idea of being open-minded. And there's a few kind of keywords and phrases that I got from this curriculum that I'm going through, and they have been so profound. And it's just so funny with kids. As long as I've been teaching, I've noticed this, but there are certain things that you just say it in just this certain way, and kids just get it. Like, you don't have to explain it further. You don't have to expound on it. And so very first year when I was getting my master's and I was a pre-K assistant, the music teacher used the phrase, "I only listen to quiet hands." And that's it. Like, and every kid, I mean, I've been teaching now, you know, almost 15 years, and I still use that. I took that from her, and they just get it. And so they understand that, you know, when we're blurting and we're doing all of this, like, oh, she needs that quiet hand. She values that. And that gives us all a safe space to share and be heard. And, you know, she values that. And so it's just funny that kids really can like pick up and grasp that, but also, you know, the language that we use, it is great if that looks consistent with all the people that a student is interacting with as they're trying to make meaning and as they're trying to learn, you know, how to form better connections and, you know, kind of where that can grow. And it's funny because I've even realized, like, as an adult, I've been challenged by going through this curriculum of, are there places that I respond in a more closed-minded way because we're going through this open versus closed-minded. And so kind of thinking, what does that look like when I hear somebody say something and I immediately have such a closed mind? And also how often I'm proven wrong with that, because I do go in saying,
Yeah.
oh no, that's not, again, I don't love change. That's not really what I was envisioning. Like, I'm not super comfortable
Yeah.
with that. Oh, wait, but, and like now going back and saying, I've told you over and over how many times I've never seen my next step coming. And if I go in with, no, that wasn't really on the card. Like that's not where I thought we were headed. Kind of what does that look like to have a more open-minded approach? And so I think that consistency of
Mm-hmm.
language is really important, because I think sometimes we can all, even as adults, we can catch on to these like bite-sized words or phrases. Like you and I were saying, we love a quote, but like those stick with me because
Yeah.
of the way that they are worded, and they get rid of a lot of the extra and the fluff.
Yep.
And it's like just this little bite-sized phrase that I can remember and that it can stick with me. And times where I'm feeling anxious or stressed or, whatever, and I can go back to these quotes, even if I'm not sitting there reading it. And I think it's the same when we have this common language to speak with our kids, whether we're kind of self-regulating, like even as adults. I think a lot of times what I'm, again, just being challenged on and refined, and even can like see this in so many facets of my life growing up and today, is, being dysregulated. And so a lot of times when we have these emotions that feel really big and they're not coming out like at all how we expected them to, or it's a surprise, I don't know why I'm crying, or, I'm really mad. What's got me feeling so frustrated? It's this idea of dysregulation, so again, it's just common language that I think we can all use, but also it gives me empathy for someone else when I can say, are you feeling dysregulated right now?
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm so tired, but that, I feel like that feels less attacking than saying like, because of course, if your mom's like, are you tired? And you're like, no, I'm not having this reaction because I'm just tired. I'm really not. Oh, the next morning I had a good night's sleep, and all of a sudden I can process and deal with this appropriately. But
that's a moment where you're like, I don't actually want to be seen right now.
Yes, exactly.
Don't see me. Don't see me.
Right. No, don't. And don't know me that well, because it's not that I'm tired. This really does matter as much as I think it does in this moment. Not actually justified and appropriate. But I think that common language with all of us, whether it is like, I'm seeing it so much in this kind of micro scale at the school level, but also realizing like, wow, how does this look when I interact with other people this way? And when people, kind of share that with me. And it just, I don't know, I think it's really impactful to have kind of those words and those phrases that we can latch on to that don't feel so personal, like it just, it doesn't feel personal to say like, are you dysregulated? Yes. And here's why. It's that I'm tired. It's that I'm starving and I'm hangry, or, all of these different things.
Because you're kind of asking, like, are you experiencing this thing that every single person experiences?
Right. And like,
it's not, there's like no judgment in it. It's so like a neutral statement of like, it's so clear. Like, I'm just looking to understand you when I say, are you feeling dysregulated right now?
Right. And of course, now I don't have this one off the tip of my tongue. I'll have to email it to you. But I saw a quote on Instagram about like dysregulation, and it gave me so much grace for my mom 20 and 30 years ago, because it was basically saying like, parents, when we are kind of losing our tempers with kids, like it's that your needs aren't being met. And so again, like you were saying, it's not personal at all, and it's not an attack. It's like, if you're dysregulated, you have a need that's not being met, and it might cause you to be acting out in this behavior or this way. But again, it goes back to like, you have a need that's not being met. So I even think growing up, if there came a point when my mom was just so frustrated with my brother and I, it was summer and we had just been home for 6 weeks straight, and like she just needed a minute. She was dysregulated because her needs weren't being met. She was exhausted. We had been there for 6 straight weeks and she hadn't had a moment's peace. And, and so I don't know. I think it helps us offer a little bit more grace and extend that like, oh, okay, so I do see this behavior that's atypical, but it comes from a need not being met. Like, can I help you with that? Do you just need a minute? Like, and also it's not personal towards me that, that you are feeling frustrated, or that you're, maybe lashing out in a way that I don't typically experience from you, but it's that you're dysregulated. So like, you have a need that's not being met, and that kind of shifts that.
Well, even like, 20, 30 years ago, if someone said to your mom, are you feeling dysregulated? She'd probably be like, what in the world is that? What are you talking about? Probably only the psychologists were, using that language. Sure. And so it's cool that, as much as it would be great if we had all that language back then, we're always learning, we're always finding new ways to talk about things. And so that even having that language now can help you go back and like heal some of those things, to look back and reflect through your lens you now have of all of this great language.
Yeah.
And to, heal is the word I have for that right now.
Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest reasons I was so excited to get to talk to you is because I am always talking about social worlds on this podcast. And I feel like that can be a kind of like abstract thing to try to understand or reframe like how you view your life in terms of social worlds, of your family's a social world. And then, you have a social world at work, and then your friends and your nation, we're a million different social worlds we exist in. But I feel like you can kind of help guide us through thinking more practically about what a social world can look like and how we can influence it, because you're kind of like a little case study, like an example for us of, let's talk about your classroom. I know you don't have, students, you said like every day, but looking back at when you did have a classroom or what you do when you do have students now, looking at that as a social world and saying, they're getting to hear from you. How do you go about creating the social world that the students need and that works for you too? Because like you were saying earlier, you kind of have to do that for sure every year that you're getting new students. And probably I would go as far to say as every day.
Absolutely. Gosh, I have so many ideas on this one. Okay, so this is super important to me because I think the longer that I've been teaching, the more I've let go of the reins a little bit, because I think when I first started teaching, academics and instruction was so important that in my head, it was almost like, I love you so much that I actually don't have time to listen to the story about the dog because I have got to teach you this stuff. And because I love you so much, I like want to teach you every single thing I possibly can in this amount of time. And so I don't have time for that story about the dog, but like, I really need you to know, the standard that I'm trying to teach. And again, that's because I love you so much. And I really want to make sure you know this. And so that was kind of my first, few years in education. That was really kind of my priority. So then I moved, and the school where I taught, relationships were like number one. And so that it's like, well, of course, that's how I feel in my personal life. Like I value them so much, but at school, that hasn't been maybe my top priority because I have so much to teach you. And that's how I'm showing you that I love you, is I'm teaching you so much. And so that kind of flipped it on its head for me a little bit to think about. We actually looked at some research. I wish I could quote who it was from, but this was several years ago. But the idea that students actually need to know 10 things about your students before you try to teach them. Like they need to have enough of a connection with you that like it's not they walk in day one and you start teaching. And so I have never forgotten that. And I thought, like at any given time, could I tell you 10 things about these students? And I would be challenged by that. When a parent would come in and say, oh, I'm sure they told you, we have this major thing going on. And I would have this kind of smile of, now that you mention it, they were trying, but I was dealing with this other, 3 things in the classroom, and I did not get that my full attention. And that is so huge to your family. And like, looking back, I should have stopped everything. I should have paused, or I should have said, I can't at this very moment, but please come back to me at this time, or I'll come find you. Let's be sure we check in about that. And so I think that truly that rule of you need to know 10 things before you teach them. Like you need that connection first and foremost before anything else, realizing that is going to drive that every student does need something different, which we were talking about kind of on the academic end earlier, but it's also important in the social sense. Like some of your students are introverted and some of them are extroverted. And I've had conversations with parents before of, we're just really wanting them to find their people. And sometimes that is a very justified concern, and we'll puzzle through that together. But we've also had students that I would say, you know what? Do you think that your child is energized by being with other people, or more by being alone? And every time they'd say, oh, for sure, being alone, like that they totally recharge by themselves. And I would say, okay, so let's think about the school day and how taxing that would be for a child of this very small age. And you're telling me they re-energize and they recharge by being alone, and they are in the most social setting, every minute of the day. And so at recess, if they're kind of taking a lap and kind of doing their own thing, is this problematic, and is this cause for concern? Do we need to step in? Do we need to provide some support? Sometimes the answer is absolutely yes. They don't have the skills. They're not equipped with, hey, how do I join a game? Or I tried and they wouldn't let me. Like, what do I do now? How do I navigate that? The playground was very traumatic for me. I understand that is, because it's a whole social world in and of itself. And so,
yep.
So sometimes it's that, but for some of these kids, that's their time to recharge. Like they have pushed all day long and interacted and answered the questions and done the partner work that they really didn't want to do. And, they've gotten through all these pieces, but at some point they do need that moment to kind of recharge to get through the next portion of our really social school day. So I think knowing your kids and knowing kind of how they recharge, same thing. A lot of times I'll give choice with partner or individual work, because as an adult, I think we used to always say, well, they're going to have to at some point. They are, we all work, we all have to collaborate with other people. We all have to work for somebody, you know, everybody's got a boss, and there are these pieces, but there are also like so many jobs that are remote where you really can kind of plug in and do your thing. So again, it's not that you never are going to have to work with somebody, and I would be ill equipping them if I didn't ever, you know, expose them to working with, you know, mixed ability groups or peers of you know, different kind of backgrounds and things like that. But at the same time, some of us are more productive and kind of think better kind of on a more solo track, where I am obviously very extroverted. I'm a huge external processor. If you make me work kind of in, we sit our desk in these rows and columns and I can't move and I can't talk, that's not going to be my best work because I am such a verbal external processor. So I think really just knowing your kids, I think coming out of COVID, social emotional supports are more important than ever. I think we missed a lot. You know, I know every state, you know, kind of responded differently. We were closed for the fourth quarter of a school year, which is a hugely significant, you know, period of time. And then when we did come back, there were so many restrictions in place. And so, you know, our desks were really far apart and we were behind masks and, you know, just things like reading facial expressions. And we lost some of that in some really pivotal years. So providing the appropriate social emotional supports now to kind of backtrack and make sure that these kids are still, you know, connecting, you know, as strongly as they would want to, and especially kind of making up for some of that time. I think it's also really important to model myself, but also be really open to like feedback and learning. So I always kind of talk about the 3 C's, like based on any experience or conversation I have, the 3 C's, like was what I thought, was it confirmed? Was it challenged or was it changed? I got that from a curriculum called Nonfiction Notice and Note. But basically, you know, when you're reading nonfiction text, like, does that kind of go with what I already knew? Is that challenging or is it changing my thinking? But you can apply that to any area of life. So I think being like more responsive myself to like feedback, to learning, to growing, to improving, and kind of modeling that for others. Like, what does that look like when someone tells me like, hey, this is an area where you could improve, or hey, have you ever thought about, you know, trying it this way? So I think all those are really important to communication, that like conflict and, you know, not even conflict, but conversations, you know, it's not always just like super positive. Like there are hard conversations. So how do we offer support there? And then some of the specific strategies that I use, one of those is morning meetings. So there's this company called Responsive Classroom, and they put out morning meetings. And when I first heard that word, I was like, oh yeah. I think we did that in elementary school. You know, we'd like look at the calendar, or maybe like count some sticks or straws or so. Yeah, I think I got morning meeting. Well, that's not what it looks like at all in 2023. So Responsive Classroom has some great resources there, but basically morning meeting has 4 parts and it's all just really systematic and really thoughtful. But the first one is a greeting. So every student gets greeted every day. And how small does that sound? Like, of course, but how often are, you know, you're kind of back at your desk, kind of getting some things ready for the day, and they're walking right in and like, no one says hi. No one says, I'm glad you're here. And, you know, again, even as an adult, when we kind of flip that script, because everything we do in this micro level, like this is all stuff that we experience as adults. How welcome and included do I feel when I walk into a social space and no one acknowledges that, you know, and no one looks at me and no one makes me feel welcome? How uncomfortable and out of place do I feel? So making sure that every student gets greeted every day, but you do it in really fun ways. So there's all sorts of different ones. So there's like a 1-minute greeting. So like we'll set a timer for a minute. You're going to go greet like as quickly as you can. Their favorite is one called shoe salad. So everyone puts a shoe in the middle and we make a shoe salad, and then you draw out a shoe, and that's the student that you go and greet. So it's very targeted for kids, you know, like these fun ways, kind of gamify it a little bit. And then after that, there's always a share. And so that share could be something like, what's the news? So like, and kind of teaching them news is a lot of times it's positive. Yeah, maybe you did something great this weekend or something fun happened, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, hey, like I'm kind of struggling with this at home. And so if you see me a little sad, like, just know this is why, like you know, this is going on. I don't really want to talk about it. So I've told you, you're aware, and I just kind of need a little space today. But getting that time, not only to be greeted and welcomed into their learning environment every day, but to share with others. And then there's always an activity, which is their favorite part. And that is more just a game. There's always so much community building, you know, that can happen there. And kind of learning some, again, great social emotional skills as far as, you know, is it a winning losing game? Are we playing on teams and working cooperatively? And then always ending that with what is called a morning message. So that's where the teacher kind of lays out and communicates the day. For again, we talk a lot about neurodiversity. So that's kind of when our students think and kind of have brains that are wired in different ways. There's kind of neurotypical, and then there are different ways that our thinkers can be more diverse or more different. And so a morning message can be really great for students who need a little bit of predictable, you know, schedule. If there's a schedule change, let's go ahead and kind of identify that first thing this morning. Hey, we're going to have to flip, you know, lunch and recess today. And, you know, we had a field trip, so our afternoon's going to be a little off, and, you know, things like that. So those 4 parts of a morning meeting are transformative. And that is such a special and magical way to start the school day. And again, it's really systematic. but it changes everything. And that prioritizes that time. So the parent's not coming to you and saying, I'm sure they told you about this. And you say, oh no, I think they tried. And another student was crying and this was happening. And I didn't follow back up with that. This is really carving out that special time. And it's something everyone, teacher included, looks forward to. Something else that I do. So when I moved to Nashville, I was in my late 20s, and when you're in college, it's so easy to meet people and connect. It is not so easy when you kind of move to that next stage of life. And so I would often find myself in situations of like, gosh, I really love that person. I think we would really be friends. How do we move to that next level? Like I see them at this certain event once a week or once a month or whatever, or I run into them every so often. And every time I do, I love them so much. What do I do with that? How do I get to that next level of friendship? Because it's easier when you're in college. It's like, well, let's go study and we'll all set up camp together and kind of work through our homework or whatever.
Well, in everything I study too, it's like there's so much on family communication and how like romantic relationships build. And there is so little research on friendships.
Yes.
And it's like they're such an important relationship in our lives.
Gosh, they are.
How do we not know more about how they build, how they form, what those bonds mean to us?
Wow. Yeah, that's wild to think about. That's crazy. I started this in my personal life and then it split over into my professional life. But when I moved to Nashville, it's like, okay, how am I going to, connect and build more than the, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And I was just really seeking deeper connection. Something about me at that time was that I found it challenging to go deep with people that I didn't know super, super well. And not that everyone has to. Some people I think kind of sit a little bit lighter and others kind of tend to gravitate towards things that are a little bit heavier. And I would find myself somewhere in the middle. Like I kind of go either way. But it was hard for me to move to depth because with someone new, if you're like sitting and grabbing coffee, which I think is such a popular way, like, hey, we don't know each other that well, let's grab coffee. But you are making like such intense eye contact the entire time. And it does tend to like get real deep, like really quick. And for me, I never know my out. I once bonded over a teacher best friend, but like we never know our out. We never know when it's like time to wrap it up. And so walking became, I was doing this kind of health and fitness challenge. I was turning 30 a few months later, and I really wanted to hit 30 at like the best shape of my life, like physically and mentally and emotionally. And I also realized that for me, like social connection was so much like going out to eat, spending lots of money, kind of all the, all of a sudden I've hung out with my friends this week, but I've eaten out 5 meals and that's like hard to come back from, And so walking became this way of like, hey, that's still helping me achieve my fitness goals. It's free. You don't have to make that direct, intense eye contact the whole time. So I find myself naturally going deeper because we're walking, we're boosting these endorphins. Like I'm feeling so happy. Oh, yeah, I don't mind sharing that hard thing. It doesn't feel as hard when I'm like walking and moving and not like staring into your soul. And then also like it's free and healthy. So like, this is great, And so what I started doing was just asking people like, would you want to go on a walk? The other benefit, it has like a specified start and end. So again, instead of coffee, I'm like, we don't know each other that well. Is 45 minutes, 3 hours? Like where are we in there? But it's like, hey, you do your little loop and then, it's okay. That was great. We'll do that again sometime. And so what I found was no one said no. Like no one was like, no, I don't. No, thanks. I'm not going to go on a walk with you. I mean, everyone was like, well, yeah, sure. Like that's quick. That's easy. But yeah, so, like it's fresh air. It's easy. It's low.
Yep.
And so, of course, being a teacher, I can't just leave a walk. I started making them themed walks. So they all have these really fun questions. And a big thing in education right now is like gamifying where we can. So like making games of things. And again, adults love all of this stuff too. And so I started coming up with all these games for my walk. And so like you would pick a game and you didn't like the title would be very ambiguous. So it was kind of like leaving it up to fate. So it was like pick a number and I would have this list of numbered questions. And so I'd say like pick 3 numbers. And so they would, and those were their 3 questions for the walk or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah. And so, it was something like that. But then I also would do like name that tune and lines and songs that stuck out to me. I would like pull that and that would be the question. So, like there's one, like I love country music. I'm Nashville. But one of them is it's about like till you can't, and till you can't, like, what is that one thing that you can do it until you can't? And all of a sudden, like you can't ever go back and change that. Like you've made this definitive choice or that person is no longer part of your life or, what are these things that you can go back and do until you can't? And so like, think of one of those, all of a sudden we're going on these like profound walks, but it feels really fun and really engaging and really deep. My favorite one that's been such a hit, I'm such a 90s kid, but I did a 90s 3, 2, 1. So like 3 things that you loved about the 90s, 2 things you miss about being a kid. And then 1 was like the name of your childhood best friend, And so like, that's a really fun one. So all these fun different walking ideas. Well, again, I decided that would be such a good way to connect with my students during recess. And so I had like a calendar, and so it was super optional. But if you want to sign up and you want to connect with me and you want some time with me, we can sign up for just like 10 minutes of your recess. Like I'll just come grab you and we can go on like a little loop around the playground and chat. And it can be either or, like either I can bring a fun question or game that we can chat about, or if you got something you just like are, wanting to share with me, that's a perfect time for it. And that calendar stayed full. I mean, and it's so funny because I still to this day, like I have a kid I didn't even know, her family, like her grandparents or whatever, have a house in New York on some body of water, and they go there every summer for the entire summer, and all the cousins come there. And like I still think about that every summer of like how magical that her whole childhood, like all the cousins and all the family gets together at grandma and grandpa's house, and like they all like live and work out of it and play, and it's on water.
And you got to hear about it.
Right. And like I still think about that all these years later, like what a cool experience. That's going to impact her forever, that will be like her summers of childhood. And so it just things like that, just ways that they feel really connected. And then I was also this is kind of the last one that's coming to mind, but how can we like involve parents and invite them more into this community? Because again, I've got their most prized, their whole world is with me like every minute of every day. And how can I, kind of brag about them? And so I kind of wanted to flip the script. A lot of times a phone call home from school is not a good thing. It's either the nurse that they're sick or they've gotten in trouble and you're not going to believe what they did. And, I got to tell you. And so how can we flip that script? Because again, we have such a positive relationship between parents and schools. And so what if a phone call home was a really good thing? And what if not only was it a really good thing, what if the whole class was involved? And what if the parent is on speakerphone with the whole class and we're bragging about the kid? So I called them sunshine phone calls. And so the kids helped me write like a little script. It was real quick. And I'd put the kid on speakerphone and the whole class would be on speakerphone. And we'd share this little, this is a sunshine phone call from Miss Higgs class. And I'd say the name of the student. They were a wonderful worker. And then I would just brag and say, hey, we're calling, we call it that. We hope it'll brighten your day. That's why we call it a sunshine phone call. But, they've been doing this and this and this. And you don't get to know that as a parent. I wanted you to hear just what an amazing job they're doing, and then the class would say, we hope this brightens your day or whatever. And so it was really quick. Like I'm talking less than 3 minutes, but sometimes these are the things that matter the most. Lo and behold, if that is not still to this day, the thing I hear about the most from parents and students that I used to have, if I run into them, if I see them, do you remember that sunshine phone call? Like the parents still bring it up. The kids still bring it up. I still get messages and emails about it. So, so that's such a tiny bite-sized amount of time, but how impactful and how much does that make us feel not only as a community within ourselves, but inviting parents and family into that community. And, like I said, kind of flipping that script on a phone call home, that it's a really positive experience. So I think that just goes back to what we talked about earlier, just celebrating successes. If I brag to the kid and say, hey, you did this great thing. Well, that may or may not, kind of get all the way home by the end of a school day, but how powerful is it to bring and invite the parents in who are going to be so proud to hear that their kid has done something, special and remarkable. So I think those are just a few of the ways that I really try to cultivate that culture of community and prioritize relationships here at school.
I love how intentional all of those things seem to be based on, where they came from for you and what they mean to you, even though, just in talking about them, it's like, okay, a walk or however long meeting in the morning or a phone call seem like really small things that are actually really big things. And it's cool because one of the other questions I was going to ask you is what kinds of things are you doing in your work that you've seen actually apply to other areas of your life? And it seems like the answer is everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's just so much transfer. I mean, they're just tiny humans. And so, I think, again, I'm constantly being refined and learning to be more gracious because I can always flip that script of, wow, they forgot this. And that does feel a little frustrating in the moment because I did try to remind them and I communicated it ahead of time and they really need that to be successful today. But also, has there been a day this year that I left my laptop at home? And that's, kind of essential to every minute of my school day. Right. And so like, did anybody give me a really hard time? And was my principal really like passive aggressive? No, she was so gracious of, hey, here's 3 ideas. Like we could do this. We could try this. What about this? We worked it out so easily. And I appreciated that grace. I'm hard enough on myself and I have really high expectations. So I think just no matter what the situation is, we can always say, but on the other side, like, what does this look like as an adult? How did an adult handle me when I was forgetful and I forgot something important? Did they kind of feel frustrated and grouchy about that? Or did they offer me some grace, problem solve and move on and never thought about it again? But it was really impactful for me that it was handled with such grace. And so trying to kind of mirror that with my students as well, the way I appreciate being treated and handled as an adult.
Yeah. I think the big idea is what changes in our world when we look at communication instead of through it, as if it's this kind of abstract thing that doesn't really matter when it does.
Yeah.
Because what was communicated to you about, okay, you forgot your laptop or, whatever the example is, it could be communicated with grace or with a million other things. And that's going to change that interaction so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about, if you are thinking about your classroom and all the things that you do with your students and the process you go through to go about doing the differentiation and educating the educators on Instagram or in your own school, if you have your communication glasses on, what's the communication that happens there? What do you see?
I think the thing that I'm still working on the most is, which is funny because I've talked for such a long time, but over communicating, because I think sometimes there's, assumptions are made of, oh yeah, I think they'll remember that, or, oh, what, but like, I think that we all are just like fielding so many inputs all day long from, our email and our text and our social media and the kids and the family and the, all of these things that like over communicating, especially in my field, is really helpful. And then a phrase that I feel like has caught on the last year or two, but like clarity is kindness. And so as clear as you can possibly be is kind. And for me, that's great if things are positive. But what about when I'm having to share something that is a little bit more challenging of like, hey, this is how I'm feeling about this, or, in the dating world of, they talk about like ghosting and things like that. Like clarity is kindness. And so I'm challenging myself, to be more clear, whether that is in, dating and relationships, whether that is in a professional setting, whether that's in a personal setting, but just being as clear with my communication as I can, rather than just, because I think ghosting, actually had a whole dinner about this one time, and it started, a married couple brought it up, but they were actually talking about how often ghosting happens in the workplace and kind of in some real estate where you would have a deal that you thought was just days from, kind of moving forward and closing, and then someone just ghosts and like you don't hear from that. And so I think, it maybe kind of originated possibly in kind of this dating world, but it's kind of moved to everything. And so I think that's because we over time maybe can be challenged by having hard conversations. So we do just kind of ghost, whether that's in I decided I didn't want to go through with that business deal. So I think I'm just going to kind of leave that one hanging, or I'm just not going to respond to that email that was tricky, or, in personal life, whatever that looks like. And so trying to navigate what that looks like to communicate clearly, and that is kind. And so even though it doesn't feel kind, because maybe it's hey, I don't want to move forward with that business deal, or hey, this conversation left me feeling kind of this way, and I felt like maybe you needed to know that. Like those are hard. And for me, I do tend to want to just avoid them and keep it real sunny and real happy and real positive. But
that feels easier to do.
It does feel easier. And so, but it also in my brain, I know that seems like such reverse logic, but that felt kinder of like, well, wouldn't you rather me just disappear than tell you that I don't want to pursue, the business deal that we had going or this other thing? And so this whole dinner was about that. And it was like, no, that's never the kindest option. And so that's really been a challenge in my life the last few years, is like, never leaving someone on read, never not responding to a message or an email, even assuming like, hey, I told you I'd come over at 6:30. So yeah, it's 6:29 and I'm leaving my apartment, but like, I don't need to communicate that with you. No, that's fine. Like, hey, you've got 10 extra minutes. I am terribly sorry I'm running late, but that, you've got 10 extra minutes rather than thinking I'm about to walk in your door. And, so just being clear, over communicating when it feels like that's not natural to me. I'm I said I get there 6:30. I'm heading in that direction. No, that's 10 extra minutes. You can, finish the laundry you've been putting off, or, whatever.
Yeah. It sounds like the clarity is kind. And then also I would say like respectful of other people, especially like other people's time, if you're using that example.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to use this to transition into my last questions, which is, we're always working toward better social worlds
Sure.
for ourselves and creating those through our communication. But, how people define a better social world is different for everyone.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to share what a better social world looks like to you.
I think the first thought, and this is probably a common response, but I think technology and kind of, phone down, face up a little bit more. I didn't even know, my friend who's all about beauty, like apparently we're getting this thing called like tech neck. And it's because we literally spend so long like bent over looking at our phone that there is like a new wrinkle that people have. that is actually very clearly defined. Like after she said that, I went home and looked in the mirror. I was like, do I have tech neck? Like, what is that? But like face up, phone down, like just that I'm more engaged. I have this funny, this is so silly. I've done it for years, but one time my friend was at dinner and I kept being like, could you like put your phone away? Like I'm not going to pay $25 for the meal to watch you on your phone. And she responded and said, I'm not on my phone, as she's like on her phone and texting. And so I made up the silliest little song in the moment. And I was like, no phones at dinner, no phones at dinner, no phones at dinner. And so now she sings that with her whole family. And it's, but it's like, if we're paying to go out and have this experience and we're eating a nice meal, like I didn't like kind of carve out this time for you to watch you play on your phone or watch you respond to 10 text messages. And so I think that's like when, again, that song is so silly, but just, like no phones at dinner. Like there's times that we carve out to just be present and to be engaged. And we're looking at everyone else's highlight reel anyway, rather than living our own sometimes. And, I think that's just really important. I think, and it's funny, I think this kind of brings it full circle, but at the beginning I was kind of alluding to, I think during COVID, we all made ourselves a lot of promises. I think during the quarantine, especially, it was like, wow, when my life went from 200 miles an hour to zero, almost overnight. It felt like it happened so quickly when we went into full quarantine mode. I think we all made ourselves a lot of promises about how things would look different and what lessons we would take from this slowdown and from this recharge and this reset. And, wow, I'm having time to exercise every day for the first time in a long time. And I feel so good. I've got to keep that. Like that has to be a priority. Or, just these different things that we did of, silly things like we would make time, in creative ways to connect with people. If we couldn't do that face to face, what were these other ways that we could stay connected? The drive-by parades were invented and like all these great things. But I don't know, maybe it is just me, but it feels like I made myself a lot of promises and then the world picked right back up slowly. Like it went, 200 to zero, but then it went 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. And so it happened so slowly. I don't think I've even been fully cognizant of how I'm right back where I was, if not 10 times more so, trying to like make up for the lost time, And so I think if it had gone 0 back to 200, I would have said, whoa, like I can't even handle this much input anymore. Like I've been, working at, this new capacity, but because it happened so slowly, I think I didn't even notice that I found myself going back to so many old rhythms and habits. So I think for me, that also a better social world looks like setting healthy boundaries so that I, whether, I don't know, the idea of kind of like saying your best yes and saying no a little bit more often, because I think, again, I'm kind of 200 to 0 and maybe now I'm at 250, 300 miles per hour. I can't give everybody the best. And so whether that's, when I am with somebody, I am so tired that like I can't fully engage in that conversation because I've said yes to everything and I'm so depleted, whether that's I'm saying yes to you, but I've got these other things going on my phone. So I'm checking this text and, I got to send this quick work thing. I'm sorry, I got to do it. Like, so I think just establishing healthier boundaries of like, what time do I check work email outside of work? What does that look like? And when do I say, no, I'm engaging with friends and, with family, and this is personal, that's professional. And this is a clear, healthy boundary there. I think it has a spillover effect. Like that makes me better everywhere. When I set healthier boundaries, I'm a better person in my personal life, and that makes me a better person in my professional life. So yeah, I think some of that, those are just a few of the kind of better social worlds is kind of prioritizing where technology fits into that. It's the biggest blessing and the biggest curse. Like I think it's completely changed everything in the best possible ways, but it has brought new challenges.
No, I agree. I think that's a huge part of it is figuring out a healthier relationship to technology because it can take away from so much of the presence that means so much. Like it's one of those small things that's actually big. Of if you are getting on your phone to scroll for 1 minute while I'm telling a story, it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing, especially over a lifetime of a relationship. That you're going to miss out on all those little moments of connection, which are the big moments.
I know you're a fellow Pinterest quote loving girl, but like one that really has stuck with me is stop glorifying busy. And I think that feels like such a challenge to me of like, why do I find meaning in that? Does that make me feel cool? Does it make me feel valuable? Like, why do I think busy is like a positive? And like, at what point I am a busy person. Like I am most energized when I'm with people and kind of out and about in the world. But where is that line between like me flourishing and thriving and just glorifying like busy for busy's sake? And, like, again, that's not my best yes when I'm just saying yes to everything. And, I go home from school and I have 4 back-to-back events at night. I'm like haggard at all of them. I'm late to all of them. I'm halfway, like they're kind of distracted kind of late, and also thinking about where I need to get next, and my mental mapping how I can make up this time, but yeah, I found myself really like convicted by that. I'm like, I do really glorify busy. And I think this fast paced world that we live in, that technology like adds so much to how much quicker we can do everything. It is easy to glorify busy, and for like, at what cost and at what point am I like actually moving forward and being really productive and putting more out into the world, versus what point am I so depleted, I've exhausted all resource, I'm not giving anybody or anything my best. So yeah, stop glorifying busy.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Rest does not come naturally to me. And it's because there's this layer of busy, and then there's maybe even deeper layer of like our whole culture around productivity and being like, that's your value right there. What are you contributing? And how dare you take a moment for yourself to rest because you're not producing anything. Right. When in reality, the resting, the saying no, the taking time to yourself is so important to be able to give your best yes.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I feel like you're talking about me when you're talking. Like, is she talking about her? Or is she talking about me? Might as well be. Okay, so my last question is using some of the language around the podcast that I've been using is to talk about our whole life in terms of turns. And you could say that in like a very small context in terms of a conversation that we just had. It was turns back and forth. I said one thing, so you responded this way, so I responded that way, and it's all turns. And then on a larger scale, you could see your life as a turn in this direction. And so because of that, then you turn this direction. Yeah. So that's just a little context for why I use this language. But I'm wondering what we could come up with as a next turn for people listening to this podcast of like, where do we go from here? Having been a part of this conversation.
Well, again, I think that segue is perfect. So I think the idea of kind of stop glorifying busy, for me, that's kind of like maybe the direction that I would say. And I guess maybe like action steps, how do I go about that, would be like slowing down. You mentioned the word intentionality earlier. And while I have these like key pieces that are really intentional, I'm sharing those examples of intentionality. But on the other hand, I'm just giving you that example of I have 4 things in a row and I'm late to all of them because the first one got off track. So that's going to put me off because I was way overbooked and overprogrammed. And so I think less of that, like less overprogramming, being more intentional, not just in like these bite-sized chunks of, this one piece of what I do is really intentional or really caring and loving others well. But then does that like offset or compensate the fact that I just blew through 4 events? I was late to all of them. I was halfway engaged. I was, not my full self, kind of scattered. What does that look like? So I think that's kind of, I would say, the stop glorifying being so busy, slow down, be more intentional with where I am when I'm there. Less over programming, and kind of like I was saying that, that best yes, like where can I put my best yes so that that's where I'm going to invest. That's where I'm going to be more intentional. And I think that is easier said than done. Like this is, if we were to check in a month and you said, hey, how's that going? Like, I don't know. I think this for me is going to be something I will have to be really intentional about probably for my whole life. Like, just like you were just saying, like, I don't think I'm programmed to rest well and to rest really easily anymore. And I think the older I get, I feel like the faster life is just moving. And I find more things to get involved in. I've met more people. So those are more people that I want to like reconnect with. Hey, it's been a couple months. We need to check in. Like, and that it's a good snowball effect. Like there's all these wonderful, big, huge, full, glorious things in my life, but I'm not giving my best to any of them when I try to do all of them. So being more intentional and thoughtful. And then when I do connect with them and I do make time for this event, really being present instead of, gosh, I don't even feel like they got the best version of me. Like that wasn't it. So
we can work towards better social worlds without running ourselves into the ground trying to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because better doesn't mean fuller. Like I don't think it has to be better social world. It means that I'm super social all the time. It means that if I'm very intentional when I plan it and when I have that time and I'm thoughtful in that and I'm present in that, that to me has a lot more effect than kind of dazzling in and out of all these places and not being able to give them very much.
I think that's a great thing to end on for our conversation.
Yay. I have enjoyed this so much. Your questions have inspired me to go back, think about some questions for my future walks and different ways that I kind of work on intentionality with my people.
That means a lot. That's a big compliment to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for just inviting me to join and share. And I think, again, that leaves me feeling really valued and heard and had opportunities to share pieces of my story and just feel like I'm so invested. And so I'm just really grateful for the opportunity.
I liked being the story hearer today. It's good.
Well, shocking, but I love being the story sharer.
Yeah, no
really
problems
hard
there.
for me to dig so deep and talk for such a long time, but I found the words. So.
Well, that is all for our conversation with Stephanie. As we said, our next turn is to find some rest. And as Stephanie said, stop glorifying busy. And I think that's great because it really is in those quieter moments, in moments of stillness, that it's easy to find more clarity and to listen to ourselves better to figure out, like Stephanie said, to figure out what that best yes is and when we maybe need to say no. And it's a totally radical idea to place this value on rest in a culture that really does glorify busy. So think about that this week. And of course, our bonus next turn is to share this podcast with someone in your life. As always, I get to do this podcast with support from the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution. We share the same goals of reflecting on our communication, learning the power of storytelling, and working to make better social worlds. If you're a fellow educator like Stephanie, I'm going to point you specifically to Cosmo Kids, which is a set of activities created by the CMM Institute. It encourages growing and expanding on social emotional skills, and it's free to download the activities online, so definitely check them out and use them with the kids in your life, whether you're a teacher or not. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us wherever you may be listening so you never miss an episode, and follow me on Instagram at Stories Live Stories Told Pod. Subscribe on YouTube at Stories Live Stories Told, and check out my website at storieslivedstoriestold.com. And of course, you're just as much a part of this conversation as me or Stephanie or any of our guests, so please DM me on Instagram, comment on YouTube, email me, or use the Contact Me page on the website. And let's keep this dialogue alive. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious. And thank you for being a part of this story. As always, I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Live Stories Told. See you next time.